Hey, ever used one of these before?
Just because I'm a school teacher, that doesn't make me a pussy.
Ladies, we have a flying extraterrestrial in the store. Can we please focus?
Toki toki!
Ducky, ducky. You
Oh
are
my
so
god.
beautiful
Okay, so I have to
to
ask,
me.
who proposed this movie?
I think it was you.
The scientist in the room.
Well, Ray, I would have to say thank you
Oh, that's all right.
because this movie is one of those movies that you kind of forget that it was there and you watch it and you're like wondering how the heck did I forget this movie was a thing? And then you want to watch it and then you forget again. You watch it again and just like it's so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was
Tentacles. See?
forever.
Oh, no. Oh, no. We've got tentacles.
and
Was that
Gio,
your cattail?
Yes.
Oh God.
Gio, you've seen this movie too, right? You didn't
Ooh,
remember
long
at the
time
beginning
ago.
until you actually saw it, right?
Oh yeah, I watched this movie in Spanish. I
Oh,
was still in
nice.
school, man.
And this movie takes you to school. Although I, I don't want to say it's a bad movie. It's not one of the best sci-fi. Doesn't take itself seriously, but then
God, no.
again, that's what it does.
Let me put it this way: this is a great, wonderful, crappy movie.
Yeah.
B grade all the
Not the
way.
best plot,
Hey.
but well, masterfully done.
And you get to see David Anchovy's butt crack. So, like.
Oh God.
This was a nice X-File episode. What do you think?
Yep.
I think
Dr. Reed, she was the
actually,
clumsiest of all.
X-Files was still going when this movie was made. So he's like being all super duper serious about aliens for like 10 years. And then suddenly goes, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to be stupid.
Oh my god! So before we start talking about this movie, let's go ahead and jump in our segments.
Oh, yeah.
Define science fiction remnant.
And for Define Science Fiction Remnant, you know the drill. If you know someone that loves sci-fi as much as we do, and we do love sci-fi, and they have not listened to our show yet, how would you define us to them? Because let's face it, we don't review movies. Do we, Ray?
No.
Nah, we professionally talk crap about it.
We dissect them, we wrap them up in a tortilla and eat them, and then decide how they taste. We do all sorts of things, but no, we don't.
Yeah, all while being off the rails. So that's us.
Rails, what's that? Where you put the boat?
I guess I'll start by saying one of the ones that I really enjoyed, and do forgive me. You can actually go back on our season 2 and get this quote and who actually said it. This is one of those things that just sticks to you, and you eventually forget who actually said it, but you love the quote so much. And again, if you're listening, just go ahead and reach out to us, and definitely we'll give you a shout out. But this comment really gets me, and I think eventually, in a way, it actually got Gio for a different reason, and it's the fact that we are kind of like that conversation that you're having on the way to a Comic-Con about your favorite sci-fi geeky stuff, and I love that. Because this is, I feel, since we started even on season 1, since we started the podcast, the whole idea was for us to just sit down on a sofa, watch a movie, and just talk about it. Not recounting the movie, not reviewing the movie. Okay, well, occasionally we do that, but mainly just talking about what's going on in the screen, what's going on in the story, and just talking. And I love that. So I don't know if you guys want to speak to that briefly, or if you have your favorite quotes on things that you have heard us being described as.
Well, if I can add to that, This is one of the few things that get me to wake up on a weekend at 7 a.m. I love it. It's like that conversation that you have with the bros in the man cave watching the game, but none of us really watch sports. So this is the sport that we watch.
Yeah.
Which is something funny. None of us actually watch sports. But anybody
Yeah.
that watches sports and want to watch the finals and enjoy it with a beer and anything, that's the same feeling that I get from coming to the talking about a movie or a property of sci-fi that we all love so
What's
much.
better than what's better than talking about sci-fi while having a whiskey or a
Well,
beer?
yeah. Well, I wouldn't drink at this time, man.
I
I
can
know that
only
it's
think
five
of one
o'clock
thing, but
somewhere,
it's
but
not what we discuss here.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's that home feeling that you're in your zone, talking about what you love.
Yeah. Do you have Geo? I don't know if off the top of your head, you don't have to think too deep, but do you have, aside from this one, do you have another quote that you might have remembered that you like?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it before, but it was so good. I don't mind quoting it again. I think it was Mr. D that brought up like is that conversation with the cool guys geeking out about sci-fi, and he said that wait, I'm talking about me. Do you remember that one?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no, I don't think it was Mr. D. Oh yeah, we talked about
Yes,
that
it
one
was
before.
him.
It was him.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice, cool.
He's certainly down with it. I like the three amigos of science fiction.
Yep.
Yes,
I like that one.
kind of like the Top Gear comment.
Oh yeah, that one.
Top
I
Gear.
forgot that one.
Nice. Awesome. So, you guys, if you're listening to this episode or watching this episode on YouTube, um, just tweet at us, call the hotline. The hotlines are still open. If you want to be heard on the show, you can call 1-305-563-6334. That number is 305-563-6334. And you could be heard on future episodes. And just send a tweet, send a message, however you want to do it, send an email. And tell us what you think about the show, anything you want to hear going forward. How do you define us? Or any message to any of the hosts, and we can make it a whole conversation. So just reach out to us and let us know. Um, are we ready for the next segment?
Hey, I just had a thought before we move on.
Okay.
Seeing as our last recording was a Christmas episode, this would be our New Year's episode, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So happy 2023 if it's already ticked over.
Let's move forward with a good movie. Thinking that maybe aliens invasions will be the next pandemic thing.
Mm.
Oh, God.
They certainly
Okay,
know
here-
how to like our enemas.
Just as long as they don't get in my ass, I'm okay.
We're gonna get on theirs.
Payback's a bitch!
Oh yeah. So here goes the next segment. We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are Monorats.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Jesse from Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike Night.
This is Sci-fi.
And for this segment, you already know the drill as well. We have a hashtag. Yes, we do. This is sci-fi. And just because we love sci-fi so much, we actually decided to create this hashtag as a way to bring the love together. You love Star Trek, you love sci-fi, you love Star Wars, you love Battlestar Galactica. Doesn't matter. You love sci-fi, you follow and post, and so we can all join together in this huge worldwide conversation. So have you guys
We say worldwide
found?
or this intergalactic conversation?
There you go. So yeah, because we are in the Milky Way. Unfortunately, we can't reach Andromeda yet, but
And we're
you
sorry
know,
for people that are lactose intolerant, but that's our galaxy. It's not our coal.
Hey, look, if you wait 3.4 billion years, Andromeda will come to us. I mean, we don't have to go there.
yeah, that's the reason why we haven't dedicated any way, of communicating to them, because it's gonna come to us anyway. So boom, boom, boom.
Tyranny of distance.
What have you guys experienced anything on this hashtag for this week yet? It's just really cool. I mean, right, there's articles. Actually, if you look at the hashtag regularly, you'll probably see some of the articles. Basically, what it is when I find something interesting that I read on, about sci-fi, any of the IPs, I actually would post it, as well as episodes of a podcast that I might have heard, that I find interesting. So this is why it's great discovery, and it's a great way, and this is the best way that I can describe it. It's a best way for me to feed and be fed to my sci-fi hunger.
I didn't know you got
um
hungry for that.
I am always hungry for sci-fi, always.
Well, I've got one that starts out as sci-fi adjacent and then goes deep down the sci-fi rabbit hole at the end. So this was some discussion that I was privy to a couple of days ago, and of course, this is at the time of recording, so it's a few weeks later by the time this drops. But Henry Cavill, who was Superman, is no longer Superman. He's it'll be old news by the time this drops, but he's been removed as Superman from the DC universe, and they're replacing him. And he actually dropped The Witcher so that he could concentrate on Superman, and then he got ousted as Superman. So he's basically been just given the shaft, which is a bit of a shame because I think Henry Cavill's a great actor. But what I heard just recently is that he's working on, he's just about closed a deal with, I think it's Prime Video, to do how to play Warhammer 40K series.
Oh, nice.
Because he is a uber nerd. He's a role player. He's a war gamer. Basically, we should get him on here because he would be
He's one of us. He's
down
our
for
people. He's our people.
I mean, Vin Diesel is a big D&D player, but Henry Cavill is an utter nerd, and good on him. Now he's got everything. I mean, he's built, he's handsome, he's an actor, and a nerd. He's just like perfect as far as I'm concerned. If I was a girl,
we get it. You got the.
I know where I'd be going.
You got the hot.
If I was
Anyway, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't, Gio?
Come on, admit it, Gio.
Come on, we want to hear it in the podcast. Come on,
Gio.
Admit it.
No, I'm all gay behind the scenes.
Tuki, caca.
Awesome.
Now I'm mixing my metaphors.
No matter what movie you put him, he's Stifler.
Apparently, Henry Cavill is big in 30K, which is like the Horus Heresy stuff, which is 10,000 years before what was the standard game when they expanded it, and he's a big Custodes player. So if you know 40K, you'll know what a Custodes are, and if you're not, you don't. And that's the way it is.
When you know, you know.
That's right. Nah, Custodes is the army of the Emperor. They're basically his personal guard, and they're like better than Space Marines, but there's not very many of them comparatively. There's 1 million Space Marines in the galaxy, at least in 40K, and there's only like 1,000 Custodes. There was more during the Horus Heresy, but there's a lot of death. So, so no more Superman, no more Witcher, but he is totally getting geeked out with his Warhammer 30K probably board gaming on Prime, hopefully sometime soon.
Yeah, and I would have to add to that. It's like, you know, as a lover of an IP, it's always amazing when you get the planets aligned in a way that you have someone that is a fan of a story, a fan of an IP, to be in a position where he can create. Um, because because of that person's love for that IP, because that person is a fan, there is a greater chance that you're going to get authenticity whenever you're recreating. In the case of The Witcher, for example, he is a, you know, he's just one of us. He's one of our, you know, he's one of our people. Um, he liked The Witcher, the game, so he was in a position where he could act as, you know, the character because he got how many hours he spent playing the game. Now, in saying this, it makes you wonder his exit. Um, you know, we don't know. We have no idea. We can only speculate, but it makes you wonder, um, because he's such a fan, if there was something in there that maybe they wanted to change and he did not agree because it wasn't authentic to what his experience was, um, to, you know, for the IP that he's directly involved in, and that's the reason why he um, departed from the project. I don't know. I always wonder about that, and I just wanted to say it out loud. Again, I was not there. I had no idea what happened, so I might be misquoting. I might be completely way off, but I wonder because that's what would happen with someone that is a fan of a thing.
I,
What do you guys think?
I
Oh,
think
totally.
these individuals being in a position that they get a bigger voice to a greater audience, gives us people that have in common likes with them the opportunity also to reach a bigger community too. Because don't go further, The Witcher. How many people like The Witcher? But biggest part of them, they're not gamers. They don't watch or play any of the video games. They didn't know about the video games or care about them. But now they know about this IP thanks to this TV series because they like the actor. So it becomes a gateway where it brings together many fans from different perspectives together into one same IP.
Hmm.
You know,
I agree with that. I definitely agree. Now, there's always that we can always talk about IPs that are huge, like for example, Star Trek, um, and why there's so much separation. I think it plays into the same thing. We have a wide gamut of Star Trek, um, and then you have people that have become part of the thing of creating um, stories for that. But since we have so much wide gamma, you have someone that is a tremendous fan that want to be true to this part of Star Trek that have become um, very endearing, very important part of their life,
mm-hmm.
um, only to be shut down by the other side that might have been into another aspect of Star Trek that was important to their lives. And you know, I don't know. I'm basically just playing devil's advocate here, but the same thing. You could see how the same thing could be a good thing for one IP, and could be a bad thing for another. Do you guys agree with that?
Are you talking about toxic
Depends how
fandom here?
big the IP is.
Yes, yes. So the bigger the IP, the more of a conflict.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we see some conflict in Star Wars, but not as much as
Yeah.
Star Trek. I think Star Trek has some more conflict.
Oh, look, there's a huge amount of conflict that started in the Star Wars community once all of the extended universe became non-canon. There was a lot of upset about that, and then Disney just started picking bits out of the non-canon and made them canon again, and everybody's like, but why?
Yes.
So that upset a lot of people, and there was a lot of division amongst that. Oh, just before we get too far away from Henry Cavill, I just remembered something else. Apparently, they're looking at him to play Eisenhorn in a movie, if you know the Eisenhorn series of books based on 40K.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, Eisenhorn's an inquisitor. They're the guys that go around rooting out heresy and witches and all that sort of stuff. I highly recommend them. Eisenhorn's a really fantastic series of books.
Awesome. So,
and he looks like Eisenhorn too, so it would be good. There needs to be an Eisenhorn movie, so hopefully that'll happen too.
Yeah, hopefully Henry would be up for an episode of Science Fiction Remnant.
Surely we can find something we haven't done yet that he's all over.
Oh God, yeah. There's certain people out there that you just wonder. They're just like us. So I can only imagine that we could have a great conversation.
I'll tell you, if they ever come here, then I'll tell them too. It's like, I know they're like just like us. They gotta sleep, they gotta poop, they get sick, just like us, and they're like sci-fi, just like us.
Yeah, that's the caveat is the love for the geekiness and sci-fi.
I thought the caveat was that they had to poop too.
No, that we all do that. We all do that, Even the aliens in this movie.
They poop potpourri.
Even the aliens in this movie, so
Well, they certainly don't like head and shoulders and up their ass.
So this kind of conversation that we're having right now is this type of conversation you could be having by going to the hashtag This Is Sci-Fi.
Celebrities pooping.
There are some rare species that are born without assholes and they never poop, but they just keep growing and eating until they explode because they can't get rid of their waste.
Oh wow!
What are those? I want to research.
Don't want to come back as one of them.
No.
I want to research that. I want to see something blowing up because they constipation.
Okay, I think this is our cue to move on to the next segment for Gio, so he can take it over.
Shout out.
Well,
Go, Gio.
For this segment, I want to give a special thank you. This is gonna be more like advertising too, because this is a community of podcasters too that always have shown their support all the time, and it's always great to have them spread the voice and engaging with us in conversations, always speaking our brains. First, I want to do a special thank you to Open Pike. Thank you all the time for the conversations, for the questions and picking our brains. Also to the FSF podcast. Love being on their show. Love watching them. If anybody has not heard about any of them, FSF podcast or Up and Pike, please do go and check them out. Also to Heretical Sayyadina. Love always. She's always making chaos in our chat room on the group on Twitter.
The chaos to your chaos, man.
Yeah, she's always right, man. That's what I like about her. She's never wrong. and last but not least, the podcast that wouldn't die.
Yeah, they wouldn't die, man. They tried.
They wouldn't die, man.
They can't kill them. Nope.
Yep. And I'm gonna leave it at that for this episode.
Awesome.
Mr. Right and
If you guys
Mrs.
have
Always
any
Right.
special mentions, this is the time. This is the way.
Awesome. So let's go to the next segment.
The Outer Remnant.
Well, I guess this is me, huh? Well, we did all right in our last recording. We all toddled off and had a bit of fun elsewhere, but this is my usual shtick. And of course, we had an episode of Radio Chaos, which was episode 144, where we went back to the manga and looked at Volume 4, Chapter 1, Headbangers Ball, Race 1, Face of Evil / Touch of Cruelty. Titles of things in Japan are just so long.
Tell me about it. Oh my god! And they don't make no sense. Too.
Like they show that Robert showed
them
me. I shave and then take a school girl to my apartment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have watched that anime, and it is really actually quite good. It's like heavy drama.
Did we ever watch the anime, Robert, or we just read it?
I think it was a manga. Is it out on anime yet?
Oh my
Or
god, I
Oh
gotta
yeah,
watch
no,
that.
on High Dive, they
oh
have a really
no,
good dub.
Geo, I'm not a member yet because I can't just bring myself to pay another subscription. But because this is there, I might have to, because I've been waiting for the anime for this manga. I've been reading the manga like crazy.
The
And,
anime's been out for a couple of years.
yes, yes. And just so you know, Gio, can you repeat in a clear voice what the name is so we can all enjoy its nonsense?
Wait. I need to look for the name so I can pronounce it properly because I know I didn't pronounce it properly.
Oh,
I
go
I
ahead.
well, I shaved and shacked up with a high school girl. I think it's basically what it is.
Let me
Shaved and then brought home a high school girl.
I was close.
so if you read that, you're like, no, this is not my cup of tea. I'm not reading this.
Oh
This is
no!
totally
Wait. The
trash.
proper translation is: after being rejected, I shaved and took a high school girl runaway. Holy shit!
Yeah.
Talk to me about self-explanatory.
No.
That's-
Look, it is actually a really good anime. It covers a lot of sort of deep social issues and sort of like psychological issues of dealing with difficulty with your parents and runaways and dealing with rejection and working out what sort of a relationship you want to have with different people and all the sort of social stigmas that come with all those things. It's actually a really good and quite heavy anime, like pretty serious, down to earth. You know, a lot of the animes are really frivolous and are just good popcorn entertainment, but that one is actually really deep. And there's a couple of times where you'll be looking for the tissues because it's sort of like, oh God, this is emotional. So yeah, I highly recommend that one.
and this is mainly the reason why I honestly, to tell you guys, I gave up on trying to decide anime or manga to enjoy based on the name.
Yeah.
I gave up.
Yeah. No, there's a three episode rule where you watch the first 3 episodes of any anime, and if you can't get into it in 3 episodes, you just skip over it and move on.
And it's not that bad because most episodes are like around 20 minutes long,
Yep.
which is also a problem because when you find something you like, you're done.
They're too short.
You could be done in a day or two. And then that's it. You have to wait for next year if they decide to make a part 2.
Well, I've been watching Bodacious Space Pirates, which is also on High Dive, and that is very science fiction-y, and it is cool fun. If you've ever wanted to see a high school girl become captain of a space pirate ship, then that's the one to watch.
You see, this names don't make no sense. You know, I'm gonna call out. The name of the podcast is Shonen Flopcast.
Yes.
Shonen Flop. Got 2 questions for you, and you can respond, via Twitter. Number 1, have you ever done So I Shaved and Brought in High School Girl Home, the manga, because it started as a manga. I've been reading the manga for a long time. Probably, I would say I would venture to guess no, because what they
Not a
do on the
fault.
show is mangas that they ended, and I don't think this has ended yet. But regardless, if you got a chance to read the manga, what did you think about it? So yeah, we had them on our previous episodes on our show, and I do listen to their show regularly, so you should pick it up too. So
I was going to say that the weirdest title that I've seen, and I don't think it's been turned into an anime yet, but it's a light novel called I was reincarnated as a vending machine. I now wandered the dungeon.
This
I haven't
I
cracked
think
that
I
one
think that
open
there's
yet.
I think that there's a secret competition in the manga world about who gets the worst name.
The weirdest name, yeah.
No, the worst. This name the animes can be in the mangas and the content great. The names are just not it.
Rob, Rob,
I
I was
think
going.
they have a name generator. They just press a button and pick whatever.
I think so. Yeah, that makes a lot of
I
sense.
think Gigak, who's an anime tuber, he's pretty big. I think he's got 12 million subs or something like that. He did a thing where he used a random name generator and came up with one that sounded like it should be an anime, but it wasn't. and he went out and asked a whole bunch of people, and they're like, "Yeah, I think I've seen that one." I go, "No, you haven't."
So based on this line, we can rename our show.
Can we?
Yeah, let me see how I'm going to run this by you guys and tell me what you guys think. So I dropped my coffee and went to get another one. That's the name of the show.
Okay. Podcast at the end. Podcast.
I woke up earlier from my podcast, but forgot my coffee. That's a great.
There you go. And we're nothing to do with that, but that's what animes and mangas are. So we would be right at home.
I watched a whole bunch of stuff, and some of it was really cool. So I want to talk about it. And yes, some of it was even sci-fi.
Yes.
Podcast.
Some of the fun was even
Oh God.
Just before we wander off this topic, I was just going to say, if you get a High Dive subscription, you have to watch Reincarnated as a Sword. It's my favorite light novel series. It finally made it into manga this season that's just finishing, and it's fantastic. I just love it, and I reckon you guys should check it out.
Nice.
Check
So
it out.
so you guys, I have something to say.
Really?
You do.
How unusual.
Yes, I have something to say. You heard it here first.
It's better to burn out than to fade away. There can be only one.
Yeah. No, what I wanted to say is "Tuki, tuki, kaka, kaka, kaka."
You are so beautiful.
To me. Are you guys ready?
Hey, I
never
didn't actually tell you what the outer rimmer was. We wandered off.
As usual.
Episode 144 of Radio Chaos, we were talking about a section of the manga which is in the middle of the Motorball arc. There you go. Finished. Let's go. Move on.
Oh my God. Yeah.
The cliff notes.
And I just have to say, I mean, before we move on to the main topic of this episode, if you have not watched Radio Chaos, you should, especially if you love Alita like we do. So yes, go ahead there on YouTube. Go ahead and give it a listen.
Oh, there's been a lot of hints from James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez and John Landau that they're really looking to do another Alita movie.
Need a blog pad.
There's a lot of hints dropping, around the start of Avatar, which is really interesting. My original premise was that once James Cameron pays back his $1 billion plus that he owes for his Avatar sequels, that the money he got from Fox, which then Disney took over the debt for, once they get paid back, which it looks like they will when Way of Water smashes everything out of the park for the last few years, that Cameron will get some more money to do new things, and one of them will be an Alita sequel. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe Valentine's Day 2023 will be the green light announcement. We'll see if that one.
And we will be here to do an episode, obviously. So
that's my prediction.
Awesome. So, you know what? Rails, what are those? What are those?
The show has evolved into something else. It doesn't need rails.
So this movie I've seen so many times over the years. And like I said before at the beginning of this episode, is that this is that type of movie that you watch, you enjoy so much, you forget about it then someone mentions just like, oh yeah, I have that movie. By the way, I have this movie in many different versions. And then you watch it again. It's like, crap, how did I forget about this one? And you watch it over again, and the cycle continues. This is a fun movie that doesn't take itself serious. However, it is full of science, which is really cool to me.
Some of which is actually scientific.
Exactly. So, Gio, I guess I'll start with you. You seen this movie? Do you
Long time
remember
ago.
a long time ago? Has it been one of those movies that you've seen a long time ago and never really rewatched until now?
Yep. Exactly that.
So,
Exactly that.
yeah, this movie I watched and rewatched and rewatched. It's so
How
much
many times have you
fun.
watched it?
Many times?
How many times have you watched it?
Oh, I can't really tell you. I mean, it's one of those that I,
That's all my
I
pay
would
grade.
I would be surprised. Maybe I would say at the very least every year.
Wow. Okay.
At the very least, and it's just so much fun. It's a fun movie. As a matter of fact, we were rewatching again. Me and Gio. By the way, we were trying to do a watch party. So if you guys are interested in those, reach out to our on our Discord channel, and we can enjoy something together. But me and Gio were watching yesterday, and we could not stop with a text back and forth. I mean, the lines in this movie, they're so much fun.
Oh
So
yeah.
Ray, how many times do you think? I mean, you're like me, pretty much with a rewatch on this movie, or more like Gio on the rewatchings.
I've probably seen it about 5 times, I think, including a few
I
hours
love
ago.
more than me. I watched
But
it once only. I think.
I remember I didn't see it in the cinema. I remember picking it up on DVD. Um, uh, it was probably a couple of years later, so maybe 2003, and it was just the cover with the yellow smiley face that immediately attracts your eye. But then you go, hang on, it's got 3 eyes. And then you go, okay, this has caught my interest. That was brilliant advertising. But it didn't really do all that well. It had an $80 million budget and made a box office of 98.4 million. So it wasn't that greatly loved at the cinema. But I think it's one of those movies that drew its audience in sort of the home market. And I expect a lot of people saw it at home. It may not have been advertised very widely, but I think that really it was one of those movies that grew into a sort of a cult following.
I think that movie was a great commercial for Head and Shoulder.
Oh, well, there's actually a commercial for Head and Shoulders right at the end of
It
the
was
movie,
definitely.
like a proper commercial.
And if you think about it, when you look at many movies and properties from that time, it's like most of the movies, they had something to do with a commercial of something that was going on big at the time, right?
Well, you get product placement in movies. So, like people are drinking a can of Coke or a can of
Yes.
Pepsi or what have you, or using something that's really obviously a product placement. But this takes it another step further. The product placement was, we're going to save the world with Head and Shoulders.
It's so good that you don't even need to do shoulders. You can be further back down.
And in case you missed it, we'll put a commercial for Head and Shoulders at the end of the movie before people walk out of the cinema. It's the last thing you remember.
Yes.
So,
movies are not done like that anymore, right? They're more careful
often,
about that.
No. But I mean, that was product placement on Turbo as a form of humor. They were sending up product placement, which I thought was really funny.
No, and it was smartly done though. I think that it has that feel of, even though it was done in 2001, it has that same feel that 80s movie have, but with 90s and early 2000s. Because that feeling, like American Pie movie, Euro Trip movie, like they have that same feeling and kind of comedy, you know?
You know, Gio, I realized something when I was watching this tonight that I hadn't picked up in the other 5 watchings of this movie, or 4 watchings or whatever it was. And it's probably got a lot to do with the fact that I've been working with you guys and looking at movies from a different perspective of an overall sort of the ambience of the movie and how it's been put together and the story beats and all that sort of thing. But it just hit me when I was watching this. Well, first of all, I noticed who the director was. Did you notice who the director for this movie is?
Nope. You go ahead and tell me.
Ivan Reitman. Now, what other very popular science-y movie series was Ivan Reitman well known for starting back in the early 80s?
I know.
You go, Robert.
Let's see if Gio knows. Do you know Gio?
I know.
Tell us.
I might know the movies, not his.
Tell us,
part of
Robert.
Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters.
Okay, so I saw Ivan Reitman's name at the start of the movie, and I remember, oh, Ghostbusters. And then I started watching this movie, and I'm looking at the story beats, and I'm looking at the ensemble cast of people who are joking around about things that are really serious. And then there was the situation which was going to destroy the world, and there was the governmental interference and them being shut down, but then they're pushed back, and the governor got involved, and then they had to go in there and save the world, right? It's the same plot as Ghostbusters and the same story beats as Ghostbusters. This movie is Ghostbusters with aliens instead of ghosts.
That is awesome.
Down to the letter.
To be honest with you, I have never really realized this, and I've seen this movie a lot until Ray mentioned it, and it's so cool. It's amazing.
I mentioned it in the pre-show. It just hit me like I'm there going, "Hang on, but okay, there's 3 guys, and then a 4th person comes along." And it's like in Ghostbusters, there was 3 main guys, and then a 4th person came on. Although this time it's the female scientist who ends up having a relationship with the one of the male leads rather than a 4th guy. But it's basically Ghostbusters down to the letter.
And I have to mention something, because I actually mentioned this to Gio yesterday. Can you guys think of any sci-fi movie that you guys can say, we are going to use shampoo as a weapon to kill aliens?
Nope.
It's the thing that stuck with me with these movies. I use Head and Shoulders to this day just in case I get aliens.
You can fight aliens and keep your hair nice and shiny and no dandruff.
That's right.
That's this is the kind of movie that we're watching. It's just I have the words.
And you laugh about that because it seems so hilarious, but it kind of works. And this movie has a lot of reasonably functional science in it. Do you want me to do the plot before we get into that, though?
Maybe we should do the plot, yes.
Yeah, let's do the plot. Okay, I got the plot right here. Come here, Mr. Plot. Oops. Okay. A large meteor crashes in the barren Arizona desert late at night, which aspiring firefighter Wayne Gray witnesses. When you say witnesses, he was actually practicing for his firefighting exam, and the meteor crashed into his car and sent it flying through the air. Strangely enough, it was still drivable afterwards. I was pretty amazed by that.
Yeah, we have to take note what car was that, so we can all buy.
I mean, the size of the chunk of rock versus the hole that it made seemed a little bit out of spec, but I mean, it wasn't rock all the way through apparently, so maybe that would change how it worked. But anyway, The next day, science professors Ira Kane and Harry Block from nearby Glencannon Community College investigate the crash site, discovering the meteor has landed in a large cave and bleeds a strange blue liquid when scraped. They quickly learn that the meteor harbors extraterrestrial nitrogen-based microorganisms that can condense millions of years of evolution within a matter of hours. The next day, the microscopic organisms have evolved into asexual fungi and flatworms that cannot yet breathe oxygen, and aquatic life the day after that. After the US Army soon seals off the site, Ira and Harry ask Brigadier General Russell Woodman, Ira's former boss, and the clumsy Dr. Alison Reed, senior researcher of epidemiology at the CDC, to aid in their research, but their efforts fail when 2 weeks later, Ira goes to court to be allowed to be part of the federal investigation. When Allison questions him as a witness, he reveals that he was discharged from the army in the summer of 1997 after an experiment in the May of that year in which he developed an anthrax vaccine and administered it to nearly 140,000 soldiers. This resulted in terrible consequences, which led to his dismissal from the position as a top-level researcher at USAMRIID, whatever the hell that means. It's a very long acronym. Upon returning to the lab, Ira and Harry discover that Woodman has stolen their research and samples, forcing them to infiltrate the base in disguise to get another meteor sample. They discover that the cabins now harbor an alien forest teeming with tropical plant and animal life, including flying insects and carnivorous plant life. That night, a large reptilian creature fatally mauls the owner of a local country club where Wayne works. I don't think it was reptilian. It looked reptilian, but they actually said it was more like a...
that was like a people crocodile.
Yeah, I think the monster work in this movie was really good, but I think it was quoted in the movie as actually being more like an amphibian.
Yeah.
And the next day, a dog-sized frog-like animal attacks 2 elderly ladies in their home.
He was cute.
until the bird,
the bird
tongue thing came out.
The thing that came out of his mouth was the best.
Oh, yeah, it was cool. Ira, Harry, and Wayne find a valley behind the home filled with suffocated dragon-like creatures, which they theorize cannot yet breathe oxygen and are escaping from the meteor site through local caverns. However, a newly born dragon quickly adapts to the Earth's oxygen and terrorizes a shopping mall before the trio gun it down. With the media becoming increasingly aware of the alien attacks, Governor Lewis visits the site demanding answers, furious at not being informed earlier about the situation. Allison believes that the aliens will engulf the United States in 2 months, and Woodman suggests a napalm strike to destroy the meteor's contents and the surrounding town. Yep, he's just going to give up the town. Good old Woodman.
I love like the college had in the back when they were doing the party. Goodbye, Arizona.
Arizona. Well, that's school kids for you, you know. You party when the world's about to end because that's about all you've got time for.
How about that sign that says, "I don't want to die a virgin"?
That was awesome. That was awesome. Carried by a girl. So
Oh my
sort of
God.
doing the role reversal there. Woodman ignores Allison's pleas, and the town begins evacuating for the impending bomb strike. Well, napalm strike. Looking at the positions of nitrogen and carbon on the periodic table on the back of Allison's t-shirt, Ira theorizes that selenium might be as toxic to the aliens as arsenic is to Earth's carbon-based life. Rather surprisingly, 2 of the dumbest students, Deke and Danny Donald, recall that selenium sulfide is the active ingredient in Head & Shoulders shampoo, which they decide to use against the alien organisms. And they get their A's for realizing this because they were failing their class. With Dr. Ira.
Cells are bad. Cells are bad.
Cells are bad.
Best essay I ever heard of my life.
Oh, wow.
Wayne procures a fire truck. Good old Wayne. And fills it with shampoo. It's, with the help of Ira's college student. Yes, it gets more ridiculous as time goes on. However, Woodman's napalm strike goes off ahead of schedule before the team can try their plan, triggering the entire alien ecosystem to fuse together into a single immense amoeba-like blob that stands hundreds of meters tall or feet tall. The giant mass begins multiplying through mitosis, which means splitting in half, which it would do indefinitely until the country was overtaken by thousands of these gigantic creatures. The team maneuvers their fire truck underneath the mass and discovers a rectal-like orifice to spray the shampoo up into. Moments before the creature splits in two, the team succeeds and the monster explodes. The governor declares Ira, Harry, Wayne, and Allison heroes. Wayne is made a fully credentialed firefighter, and Ira and Allison begin dating. Well, actually, they begin boinking, but you can call it dating.
They consummate the
they sneak off.
relationship.
They sneak off into the head of the into the cab of the fire truck, and I believe the term used was Ira was giving Allison some of the Kane madness.
Kane madness. That was a horrible quote there.
It was.
Oh
That
my
wouldn't be
God.
sexy.
Later, Harry, Ira, and Wayne are shown promoting Head and Shoulders for both hair care and fighting aliens.
Oh my God.
Product placement.
I think Gio liked that commercial.
Roll credits. Jesus.
Never been a head
So-
and shoulders guy, but it sold me out.
So you guys know now the kind of movie we watched.
This is the hardest plot I've ever tried to keep together through.
This plot is so good that we didn't need my plot for it.
I can't decide if this is a comedy with a bit of sci-fi in it or sci-fi with a lot of comedy in it.
Yeah,
It's very well written.
It's one of those questions that will remain a mystery.
Mm.
Oh my God. Was it just me, or did anybody wonder how the solution to kill the aliens didn't come from scientists of the US military? It just came from two flunking students, Dick and Danny.
Who looked after their hair really carefully.
They flunked him, they flunked the class, but they know the chemical composition of Head and Shoulders.
Or the active ingredient, anyway.
The active ingredient. Yeah, and just the way that they do it is, adds to the comedy. They're like, their demeanor is completely different until you get to that scene when they're describing, oh yeah, you could use selenium. It's in Head and Shoulders. Haven't you see our hair? Oh my God.
It was beautifully done.
Yes. Oh yes.
I mean, you have these two characters which appear at the beginning and near the end, and otherwise they're just a sight gag. And the setup was like right near the start of the movie. They're just not in it for the rest of it. Then they just pop up at the end with the solution.
That's cleverly done, because we established early on in the movie that these two individuals are just dumb as a rock. So you never really expected plot twists. They figure out how to how they can get the chemical that they need to kill the aliens towards the end of the movie.
Well, selenium actually is quite a rare element. Australia, being from Australia, I know a thing or two about Australia, but Australia is a very old continent, and so a lot of the selenium's been leached out of the soil. So our soils don't have much selenium in them at all. And selenium is actually quite important for a small amount of selenium. It's quite important for proper human growth. Selenium is actually quite important for your hair in that it helps with hair growth. And a lot of people who have problems with their hair being really sort of coarse, if they get more selenium in their diet, it softens their hair and makes it silkier.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember that selenium is also important in your diet, a small amount of selenium. And being that Australia doesn't have a lot of selenium in our soils, we don't get a lot of selenium from our fruits and vegetables. So actually, Brazil nuts are high in selenium.
So what you're
No.
saying is
Because
that
the
Australians like with hair like you are a rarity.
somewhat.
No, because they can buy Head and Shoulders.
Well, I use Head
There
and
you go.
Shoulders, so I'm good. But yeah, I was told many years ago.
My shampoo is called Aussie.
Well, there you go.
Hmm.
Won't have selenium though because it came from here.
Boink, boink, boink.
We
So
don't have any.
basically, you need to switch shampoos.
Yeah.
No, it's from Australia, man. They actually milk Australians and make shampoo with them.
Oh God, aren't you glad we're explicit?
It's great condition,
Oh
man.
my God.
It's super moist.
I'm glad it's late night here because I couldn't deal with a comment like that any other time.
That
Yeah,
would be a
yeah.
bad idea. I'll see Ray later complaining that he got beat up with a black eye because he was like, "Babe, you want shampoo?"
Oh my God. And
The walnut
there
tree
you go.
draws selenium out of the soil in Brazil, and the Brazilian rainforest soils have a lot more selenium than the older soils in Australia do. So that's why Brazil nuts have way more selenium than you'd expect, and they're a good source of selenium. So yeah, if your hair is coarse, eat Brazil nuts.
So I have to talk about something that I found really interesting in this movie. It's the thought process that in this case, the scientist. This is Ira and Harry. They're kind of trying to discuss, okay, how we're gonna kill these aliens. Because at this point they have gone through the part of where they discovered the fire is actually a contributing factor to the aliens evolution. So the fire would actually speed jump it in a way that it would just grow. I mean, they're already growing fast, but this is just going to kickstart it to go even faster. So one of the things that I found interesting, and I guess in my head I have a lot of questions. It's how reading the periodic table helped him discover what is or what could be the element that they need to kill these aliens. So the way they thought about it, and this is just my interpretation of it. We know the arsenic is poison to carbon life base forms. So if you look at the periodic table and you try to find the position of these two elements, you find carbon is number 6. And if you go down 3 and write 1 from carbon, we get to arsenic, which is number 33. So they figure, okay, that's what works for us. So now we're going to apply that to the aliens. So the aliens are they're nitrogen base, which is number 7. If you think about it, is right next to carbon on the same line. So if you go down 3 and 1 to the right, just like we did with carbon to get arsenic, you get number 34, which is again 1 over from arsenic, which is selenium. I thought that was really clever. And it makes me wonder. I mean, it makes sense in my head. You would replicate the process. Okay, what's poisonous to us, must be poisonous to them if you move on to the periodic table. But I always wonder too, that shouldn't always be the case. Does it? Maybe I'm overthinking this, but I just want to bring this to the conversation and see what you guys think about that. Because I mean, technically that could be apply to anything. Let's say, for example, you have an oxygen base life form. That means that bromine would be poisonous to them. So it's kind of like applying the same process. And a fluorine based being, that would probably be Superman, because if you look at number 36 as Krypton. What do you guys think? I mean, I just found that really funny when you go down the periodic table and you find Krypton. I know it's not the same thing, but
I
still
mean,
funny.
it was pretty much a stab in the dark. We've never encountered a nitrogen-based life form, although it's postulated that it could possibly happen. But then, if I go on about that right now, I'm completely ruining my the science behind science fiction that I was going to use. I go too deep into that just now. We'll get back to that later. But I mean, a lot of these things are pretty much a shot in the dark, and you want to try and find some sort of logic somewhere that you can at least experiment with and see if it has the same effect. So I suppose looking at what the variation in the periodic table is from the basis of our biological structure to the thing that inhibits that biological structure and acts as a poison to us, and looking at how they're separated on the periodic table, and then going, okay, these guys are based on nitrogen. If we follow the same logic, will the thing in that position on the periodic table cause them harm? And if the interactivity between carbon and arsenic is negative, will the interaction between nitrogen and selenium be negative? That's the theory. So you have a theory, then you need to test it. Now, you don't really want to be testing it against a giant alien blob that, if it manages to finish separating, will become two giant alien blobs that are unstoppable. And, if you nuke them or if you bomb them, the heat will just make them get really even bigger and they'll just destroy the world. That's not the time when you test these things. What you should really be doing is taking a very small innocuous sample and trying it out on that first and seeing if it works. Jumping straight into field trials or field studies, as this would be, would fit into the field studies of a sort of a make it or break it kind. Break it being breaking the Earth, and being the end of carbon-based life on Earth. You would rather not start there. You would rather start with a small controlled experiment and see what happens. And once you had some more confidence with what you were doing, then you would move on to using it as a weapon to save all life on Earth. But they didn't really have the time, and they just went for it.
But I wanted to ask you, because it didn't make sense in my head. If they were nitrogen based, isn't nitrogen very volatile to heat or firepower?
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I was going to save this for the science behind science fiction, but my reading on the subject is that nitrogen could possibly be a basis for life, but it would have to be in a much colder environment, because the
heat would not really do what it did in the movie.
the long chain nitrogen molecules are volatile in higher temperatures, like the temperature of the surface of the Earth, for example. So whereas we couldn't live on a planet at minus 40 degrees or minus 60 degrees without having some serious environmental adjustment back up to the temperatures that we survive in.
Mars?
Yeah, like a nitrogen-based life form would live on somewhere much colder, which would probably be much further out from the sun. So there's this thing called the Goldilocks zone, which is where they say that it's possible to get liquid water. And liquid water is required for carbon-based life, right? Water is hugely important.
That's what you call around the star, the hospital zone too, right?
Yeah. They call it the Goldilocks zone. But the Goldilocks zone for a nitrogen-based life form would be further away from a star if the star was equivalent to ours, because it would require colder temperatures. But as you say, heating up a nitrogen-based life form, based on what I've been reading, would, rather than make it hyper-evolve, would just destroy it.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, the other factor to it is they are being heated up on a carbon-based atmosphere.
Yeah.
So it makes the fur more volatile at the same time, right?
Well, the nitrogen-based, if it's a nitrogen-based life form and we are on a planet with nitrogen gas, which is the major component of the atmosphere, that would be a bonus for them, because they wouldn't have to look very far for material to make more of themselves. All they have to do is absorb the nitrogen gas and then, put it into the processes which create the substances of their biology. It would appear that they were suggesting that oxygen was a toxin to them as well, and they had to be able to breathe it. Now, we breathe nitrogen all the time, but we don't metabolize it, and it's fairly unreactive at sort of our temperatures, the gas is. So we breathe it in and out, and it doesn't react with us particularly much at all. It's just sort of there, like a filler. The things that we react to are oxygen and like things like carbon monoxide and stuff like that. But nitrogen as a gas really doesn't do anything for us. It's just there as a filler to make the atmosphere, to carry the other gas molecules that we actually need.
Interesting.
But it's one of those things where, how would a nitrogen-based life form react to all this nitrogen being surrounding it all the time? That could speed up its processes, because it doesn't have to look for nitrogen, because it can just absorb it out of the air in large quantities. But this whole idea of a rapidly metabolizing alien life evolving in a cave over days is a little bit far-fetched, because anything that's life cycling and reproducing at that speed needs a lot of energy. Because it's imagine if you lived your life in a week, you'd have to eat all the stuff that you'd eat in your entire lifetime in a week. You would be perpetually going.
You practically live eating.
You wouldn't be doing anything else.
Yeah.
If you were trying to live that quickly. So things that live really fast need a lot of energy, depending on the size, and people study bacteria because they go through life cycles quite quickly, and you can look at evolution in very small single cellular organisms quite easily, because they have so many generational cycles per year. So you can actually watch them for a year and actually see them evolving, them changing, reacting to their environments, and the ones that have the genomes that are of advantage in that environment become more populous, and not as individuals, but as a colony, they evolve. So they're single cellular, but they evolve as a colony. Yeah. So if you have an alien life form that's doing something like that, but it's doing it hundreds of times faster, it would need hundreds of times more food. Now, it's got the nitrogen there, but where's it getting its energy from? Now, carbon cycle or the biological carbon cycle on Earth gets its energy from the sun. Light comes in, hits leaves, they get turned into the light energy plus water and stuff from the soil gets turned into sugars, and then those sugars get turned into plant material and fruits and all the other things, and then the animals come along and eat those. And then big animals eat small animals, and then we eat the big animals or some of the small animals as well. And there's this cycle. It all goes around, and then we die, and our bodies go into the earth, and small things eat all that up, and all these nutrients are cycling. But the energy is coming from the sun. Now, these creatures were in a cave. Where were they getting their energy from? Because they would need a lot more energy than they could have got in a cave. So that's the big question.
The mist that was created on the bottom of the soil, was that
Yeah.
nitrogen atmosphere they were creating to sustain themselves in our atmosphere,
I,
right?
th- I think they were trying to exclude oxygen because oxygen was
Mm-hmm.
toxic to them. So obviously in those caves, and you notice that they went in with breathing apparatus once it was set up as a containment area. That would
Mm-hmm.
have been because as the population in those caves grew, there would have been less and less oxygen available because they would have been pushing it out. So there wouldn't have been enough oxygen to breathe in there without an oxygen mask, which makes logical sense. But I still can't see where they got their energy from to evolve that quickly.
And what about the ones that were actually existing in water-based environments, like the one that gets found in the filter of the pool, or the
Well,
amphibian that
they're
comes out of the lake?
evolving. They were evolving because if you notice that one dinosaur-looking thing, flying thing, evolved from the ones that died, and it became tolerant to oxygen. So you would have a lot of variations in their evolution, which this must be one heck of a Noah's Ark in a way of compos. Like I know, if you look back at Earth, um, evolution's first step, the single cell organism, and I think that would be the inception of this story. Having something, but then again, it's just I find it really interesting and clever how they took that story and they stepped it into high gear in the point where you have this Genesis type device. If you follow Star Trek, you probably know what I'm talking about. Alien in nature, coming to Earth, hit Earth, and then try to terraform the planet, and then the beings starting as a, what was it, a single cell,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
towards the end of the movie we have primates, very very intelligent
Blue monkey,
primates.
blue monkey.
Blue, Baba,
That's
blue,
a
I
fake.
would die.
That's a face for radio.
I was trying to explain that to my wife. Um, that is a very clever comment.
Mm.
You
I
got a
know a
face.
few. I know a few DJs. Not wrong.
You got a
I was
face
going
for
to say,
radio.
what other property have we looked at recently that reminds you of the start of this story? Let's see if you get it.
Oh wow.
And it wasn't a movie, and it wasn't a TV series, and it wasn't a novel, and it wasn't a computer game.
But
Anime.
it wasn't an anime. It wasn't a manga.
It wasn't an anime.
Oh wow.
Come on.
Crap.
Wow. Mental block.
Yep.
Yeah. Tell me, right?
Arcs.
Yes.
Arcs.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. This is, and you guys by now you have probably heard that episode. This was a first for us. It's the first episode we have done, even if you include season 1, where we cover a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, this is exactly what humans did on that comic book, what the aliens did on this movie. It's the exact same thing. Well, let me not say exact same thing because they were, that they had to be rebooted into this new um, animal, which is completely different from them. We don't really know. We know that these aliens in this movie had intelligence, blue monkeys. Um, but we don't know if this is which I would love to find out if they, this is the reason why I said I always wish there was a part 2. I know the movie ended and that's it, story ends, but you kind of like to get some background story and seeing, like, are these just an attempt to transform a planet for the upcoming invasion, or if this is them kind of doing what what was done in the comic arc, where this is their last shot, and they want to transfer themselves into new creatures, into a new planet, because maybe their planet is shot or whatever. So those are questions that I have that I know I'm never going to get answers to, and that's the reason why I always wanted a part two. Not necessarily for the story, but to get more answers to my questions. What do you guys thought about that? Oh,
I'm just trying to think of if I pretty much agree with you. Dr. Ira still had his original samples because the female doctor, Lewis, I think, Lewis, she stole them back, and he ended up with them. So he was going to use them to write papers and get the kudos for discovering the alien life forms and get a Nobel Prize out of it and all that sort of stuff. So he still has samples. That they destroyed the monster. They destroyed the out of control alien environment, but there's still alien life that he
No,
has.
remember they have the liquid form that came on the original meteorite that had not evolved.
So yeah, he still has samples, frozen samples,
which gives you kind of the whole premise of how they actually go and do the mitosis. I'm not a scientist. To actually evolve from liquid or rock form into actually living organism. But it leads me to wonder too, if there's a lot of elements of our atmosphere that determine the shape and form that these microbial forms took to evolve into something that was not minuscule. Right?
That is a big that is a big thing. Could go anywhere because we already know that anything is the product or the surroundings. So I am definitely sure that if we had, for example, a complete different alien planet where this actually falls into, that it would actually create different life forms than it does when this, like what we see in this movie when it hits Earth, because that chemical composition is a very interesting thing when you mix things together and then you do the same process but they're different composition. What you get is gonna get something completely different or slightly different, definitely different, and some variation.
Well, there's a lot of factors involved. There's a genetic factor and there's the environmental factor, and there's a whole bunch of facets within that environmental factor, which is like the atmospheric pressure, the amount of gravity, how much water or whatever other fluid is around that you need for your biology. There's a whole bunch of factors which, they were under the same gravity as us when they were evolving here. They are under the same atmospheric pressure. So it's not that unlikely that they wouldn't form structures that were similar to what carbon-based life has formed on Earth. Of course, there's a whole myriad of different, bioforms and things like that, like octopus and the shape of fishes and all that sort of thing. But, the variation aside between land and sea, there were a number of things that were impacting them from the environment that was the same as what happened to us when we evolved, or carbon-based life. So it wouldn't be impossible for a nitrogen-based life form to end up looking a bit like carbon-based life form because they're in the same environment, is what I'm trying to get at.
And I definitely get that. I really, really get that because, that's what, evolution, it's a very, let me say, mysterious topic for most people because what they envision is that you started as this, and then this became this, and then that became this, and technically that's not how it works. Basically, what it is that you have a being that evolves into many different things, and the things that are not adaptable to the environment die out. So then the one remaining, or multiple, could be one remaining beings, will continue creating variation, because we're all variations. I mean, if you think about it, that's why my DNA and your DNA are not exactly the same. And that's how you can find out, who's your dad. Let's take a DNA test and find out, okay, we're close enough, but we're slightly different from each other. So even in today's day, this forking of beings is still happening. So the weak ones die out, that stronger stay in, and over millennia, it's you're gonna have something completely different than what you started with. And also brings to the fact that, let's say, for example, with the chemical composition that we have on our planet today, if we started out at, with this level of you know uh, chemical composition in the air and the environment, we might have turned out to be something completely different. Because not only you had that, but you had also the external factors outside the planet, like the position of the sun. How hot is the sun now compared to how it was before, or how cold? um how was the composition of the air? Everything has a strong factor. And this I like to call, and I'm sure not using a scientific term here, but I like to call it forking, because it forks. You have maybe 3 or 4 or 6 different beings coming from one
That's how we
variation.
reproduce, by forking with each other.
And there goes your scientific for today. um
Hey,
You
baby,
always
that's
have to turn it back to boinking, don't
hey,
you?
well, I'm always forking around, man.
Uh-huh. You're forked
so
in the head.
so I always thought about that, and it's and I find it very fascinating, and wonder if you guys thought about that particular, that in particularly.
Can I add to your diatribe on evolution there for a second?
Your forking comment.
I'll just mention that Charles Darwin was a very, very intuitive man. He traveled all around the world looking at different creatures and things like that. Now, evolution happens over millions of years, and he worked it out over a couple of years, where he wasn't seeing evolution, he was seeing the results of evolution and the differences. And he said, how did these differences come to pass? Everybody says at that time that God made all the different animals. But then there's all these fossils that are different, and they started understanding that you could look through the layers of the soil and see different layers and different strata which equal different times in geological time, and how the fossils were different going back, and there was all these other things. And he's going, it doesn't look like it was all just dumped down here like it is now. Things have been changing, and it looks like they've been changing for a long time. How were they doing that? And he worked out that there was something to do with the environment, because the environment hasn't always been this way. Because if you look back through the fossil record, you can see all sorts of things like carbon layers from volcanic eruptions, and you can look through the permafrost and see all sorts of different layers from different events happening. So the idea was coming forth at that time that the world doesn't stay like this. In fact, the reason that humanity is here the way it is now, and that we have developed our own awareness and become sentient and have societies and have had the time to build up civilizations, is because the world has actually been strangely stable for the last 11,000 years. Unusually so. And it is expected that things are going to go pretty haywire sometime in the next few thousand years.
Yeah.
I guess I won't be around to see it, but I feel sorry for humanity when it does happen because, you see all these disaster movies and you go, yep, well, I don't want to be here
Now
for
it's your
that.
opportunity to say, I am very sorry, great grandkids. I don't care.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So anyway, things have been really stable and that's why we're here. But generally, things change quite a bit. And it's those massive environmental changes which wipe out huge numbers of species that just can't manage to survive. Now, taking the one that everybody knows about, and that's the extinction of the dinosaurs, I think it was 94% of species were lost at that time.
Were there really
and
dinosaurs?
it wasn't.
Yeah, and there, I think they're, what I read was, species that were small in comparison that were able to hide were the dominant ones, and dinosaurs typically were on the big side. It was a lot harder for them to go into a cave, and that play into the extinction factor for them.
Well, when the environment is good and there's lots of, the food chain is good and there's lots of food going on, you can get bigger. And also at that time, the oxygen content was greater. So there's more oxygen. And, carbon-based life needs oxygen. Carbon-based life needs food from other organisms in general to grow and survive and live as a species. When all that stuff is around, you can get really big because the stuff's there that you need. But when you have a massive environmental shift, which was caused by the asteroid impact. Now, the asteroid impact didn't kill the dinosaurs. It was what it did to the environment that killed the dinosaurs. Certainly, the asteroid impact killed a lot of dinosaurs in the Americas. The actual impact and the shockwave and the fires and everything, that would have killed a lot of dinosaurs. And but dinosaurs on the other side of the planet wouldn't know much about it. But the nuclear winter, as we call it, because it's expected that if there was a nuclear war, they'd just throw so much dust up into the atmosphere that you would get a blocking out of the sun, and then the plant life would die, and then everything else would die, and the acidity of the seas would change, and that would kill a lot of sea life. And the people seem to think this planet, we can do whatever we like and it'll be fine. But no, everything's connected. And if you screw badly enough with one part of it, you will destroy most of it. And it probably took hundreds or thousands of years for that long-term disaster to kill most of the species that ended up dying out. But as you said, the small things were the ones that were able to survive because they didn't have as higher requirements to survive. And that's why they survived. And mammals were only very small at that time because if they got big, the dinosaurs ate them. So they stayed small, they stayed underground, and they were the ones that survived. And that's why we're here now. If it wasn't for that big chunk of rock, humanity would not exist.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because that actually is part of evolution.
Exactly.
You have, I'm sure there were some primates that grew larger and some grew smaller. And what happened is the largest got eaten, the smallers got hidden. And that's evolution right there. And
well,
many people
they wouldn't have been primates. They probably sort of rat mole kind of creatures.
Yeah, so but you know what I mean? It's like that's what evolution is. It's not this magical thing that you turn magically into something else.
No.
It's just that the ones that couldn't survive, the ones that could survive are the ones that are writing the story for the rest of the planet.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it like a tree, you can have a tree with lots of branches and everything sort of spreading out. And say the tree was hit by lightning and split in two, and one half of the tree died. All of those branches are gone, but there's still some branches that survived over this side, and the tree grows out from there. And that's kind of like what evolution's like, in that you get this evolutionary tree where things are radiating out and differentiating, or they're geographically separated and the environment's slightly different, so then they change in those environments and change to the point where they can no longer be mated together and produce viable offspring. That's your definition of a species, and then you get two different species, and it just sort of keeps moving out like that. And then when you have these global upheavals, a whole bunch of those species get knocked out, and then you have a small number of species that start that again, and then it starts radiating and growing out again. So you've had these pinch points over history of mass extinctions, and the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs wasn't actually the biggest one. There was a bigger one earlier on that took out 99%, they think, of species way back when. It was much, much, much earlier. But these sorts of things over geological time are not uncommon, but over the length of our lifetimes seem like they're very separate.
Oh wow!
Spared no expense.
I think it was Robert and I were watching like Because of Science guy explaining how it's impossible for these giant dinosaurs to really be able to exist in the current atmosphere, because they would
Yeah.
asphyxiate because the air is too thin, and the gravity would have killed them too, because the mass
I
bone,
don't think gravity has changed.
Yeah, but the density of the air changed the effect of gravity.
More oxygen in the air.
It's more atmospheric pressure than gravity. Gravity hasn't changed. I mean, the Earth hasn't lost any mass, any significant mass to change the amount of gravity that we're under. That's pretty stable. But
if the
atmospheric
oxygen was
pressure,
denser,
that can change. Yeah. Well, I mean, oxygen builds up when you have a lot of organisms that are producing it. So there has been periods of time, they believe, over geological history where there has been much higher levels of oxygen than there is now. And they sort of worked that out when they found tracks of centipedes, which they worked out were about 1.5 yards long, which is like 1.5 meters long. So massive centipedes. Now, the thing about insects is that they're limited in size in our current atmosphere because of the concentration of oxygen. At this concentration of oxygen, they can't get really big because they absorb oxygen through osmosis, which is basically they don't have an organ where they breathe it in and out. They just have holes or pits along the sides of their bodies, and through that they just absorb it via osmosis. So it's not an active extraction of oxygen from the atmosphere; it's passive. And because of that, the osmosis can only work to a certain depth. So if you get a mutation where the insect gets really big, it's going to suffocate, or it's going to have a lot of trouble moving around, and then it's going to get eaten by something else. So it's not going to function well enough within this oxygen concentration to survive.
I think that's perfect for a
so its genes
centipede.
won't get passed on, so it won't become the dominant form of that insect. So we won't get any really massive insects in this concentration of oxygen. Now, if the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere went up, not only would we get much worse bushfires because there'd be more oxygen to feed them, but you could get bigger insects showing up. And like Gio said, dinosaurs probably lived in a period where there was a higher oxygen concentration, so they could get bigger because they could breathe in enough oxygen with each breath to feed their massive bodies. Trying to do that in this oxygen concentration would be a bit laughable because they probably wouldn't survive much beyond birth. As soon as they started getting big, they wouldn't be able to get enough oxygen and they'd collapse.
You know, another thing that I was thinking about based on that process that we figured out before, where they were trying to figure out what was poison to them, right? So there's a comment you mentioned that carbon base needs oxygen, right?
Yeah.
So if we follow the same formula, I call it it's not formula, but technique. These are nitrogen based forms. So that means based on the same technique and the periodic table, that means these
What are
aliens
they breathing?
would need fluoride.
I don't know. There's not a lot of fluoride in the atmosphere, so I don't know what they're breathing. I mean, carbon-based life absorbs carbon through, like digesting other things with carbon in them. There's probably some bacteria that pull carbon from rocks, which started the whole process off. But plants pull carbon from the air in the form of CO2, and they split it, and they use the carbon to make sugars, and the oxygen is released, and that's where the oxygen comes from that you breathe. Now, most of the oxygen that's produced for our atmosphere isn't actually produced by plants. It's produced by organisms floating on the ocean, and I can't think of the name of them for the life of me. But it's not actually plants that produce the most oxygen in our atmosphere.
It's not plankton, is it?
The
Plankton, yeah.
Plankton.
Yeah, I think
Plankton.
it's plankton. I think that's right. But basically everybody thinks, the plants are giving us the oxygen. They're giving you some, but the bulk of it is actually coming from plankton.
The bad guy from
floating on the ocean.
SpongeBob. The bad guy from SpongeBob.
Yeah.
That's the guy that's doing
him.
the job.
Yeah,
Work.
yeah.
It's really, and you know what? This is why, many people think, okay, oceans are really not that important towards that.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Like the oxygen is produced by plants, so but if you think about it, there's a lot more ocean in this planet than there is land, and the ocean produces oxygen as well. So the way that we're treating our oceans, if the oceans go first, we're doomed, because the land cannot produce enough oxygen to compensate for the amount of area producing that is the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might not be aware of this, but plants actually use oxygen as well to respire. But they produce more oxygen than they use, which is how they have a surplus of oxygen. And it's the same for plankton. They'll use some oxygen to respire, but they produce more in photosynthesis than they do actually use. And plants actually increase their uptake of oxygen at night because they're not photosynthesizing at night because there's no sunlight.
Yeah.
So people who fill their room up with plants thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to get a lot of oxygen. Well, if it's a fairly dark room, they're actually going to have less oxygen, and at night they're going to have even less oxygen. So, so it's not necessarily good option.
So when they say open up a window, they're not kidding.
Let's just hope that you don't live in a really polluted city or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all of these sort of ideas that people get where they think, you get one statement: put a plant in your room because it produces oxygen. Yes, but there's always a but. So yeah, always look into the buts, because the buts make a big deal.
Yeah,
they're nice and chunky.
And I knew, I was expecting that.
Yep,
I saw Captain Chaos' head come up, and something was coming up.
He hears the word "but" and he looks up, and then you can see the wheels turning.
Hey, the best thing that I've ever heard is, I hope you have a day as nice as your butt.
That's a good compliment.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that show from the 80s, Beavis and Butthead. Where they listen to they are present to an entire conversation, but they're gone after just a word. He said but.
I am Corgorio. Give me toilet paper.
So, that's complete cycle. We went through a complete, intelligent, scientific conversation to Beavis and Butthead.
To Corgorio.
But like I said, there's a lot of good science in this, and there's a whole lot of looking the other way and forgetting about science because we want to make a fun movie.
Yes.
That giant amoeboid monster thing, yeah, it couldn't have survived because the inside of it would have been whatever the thing breathes, it wouldn't have got into the middle of it. Because amoeboid creatures don't tend to have circulatory systems or lungs. And the structural requirement for a mass of that size, there's a multiplication factor. I think it's 4 times. So even if, we made Geo 4 times bigger, that's what she said. Even if the whole of Geo 4 times bigger, his bones wouldn't be strong enough to hold him up, and his muscles wouldn't be strong enough to hold him up, and he would collapse.
So let's not even talk about my boner.
Because even if you double Geo's size, and so you've doubled the size of his muscles and you've doubled the size of his bone, you haven't increased the density of the bones or the strength.
He wouldn't be able to get hard still.
So
I'd rather be smaller then.
Well, you would have
I can get hard. I don't mind.
You have to have a huge heart to be able to pump that much blood. Let's put it that way.
I am, man. I'm full of
his
love.
heart would be bigger, but it would only be 2 times bigger. It would need to be 4 times bigger to function properly.
So my penis. It's kind of my penis. It gets like 4 or 5 times bigger than it is.
You'd need muscles that were 4 times bigger, not 2 times bigger.
This is a great analogy
for him to be able to move around.
This is a great analogy to my penis. That's how it is.
And this is,
you just get like 4 or 5 times bigger.
Oh my God.
Is there any way, Geo, that I can get you to think about anything but your groin?
No, man. That's like my whole ego is all around it.
And this could be your problem.
And this is why I mentioned, Beavis and Butthead, We had an entire conversation.
There's a reason that I didn't flunk chemistry and biology for some reason, but it was not because of my knowledge. It was because of my biology.
But you see, this is the tyranny of size. You can't increase the size of something without increasing the density to be able to support it. And a giant amoeboid thing, I just don't see, without bones, and it would have had to have massive amounts of muscle to be able to hold itself up.
Every time you say massive, I like it.
Uh-huh.
And Gio, just to bring you in perspective, what Ray is talking about is exactly that conversation that you watched in that video, because it's science. That was the conversation they were having about size and dinosaurs
and massiveness.
Yep.
Well, there was this dinosaur called Brasiliensis, I think. Was
it from Brazil?
And shockingly, yes.
Brasiliensis.
And it was mentioned as being unusual because it didn't seem to have a cap on its growth. It would just keep growing. So when these sorts of dinosaurs are small, they can be taken down by the carnivores. But when they got to a certain size, they were just too big, and nothing could stop them. And this one, they believed, because they found some bones that were ridiculously huge. They believed that it just kept growing. Now, these dinosaurs were terrestrial, but they were so big that they would have to hang around in swamps to support their massive bulk because their legs couldn't hold them up.
Oh.
And it would just keep eating and keep growing until it got so big that it, was crushed under its own weight.
It makes sense. I mean, I think I read something about that, about sharks like that, like about how the fish would not outgrow its environment.
Yeah.
So the environment would determine the size of the species. Like they were saying, like if you get a shark and you put it in a fish bowl, it will not grow more than 8 inches. But in the ocean, it will grow more than 8 feet.
Yeah,
and I think that is scientifically proven.
There can be some feedback mechanisms within the biology of the animal which will limit its size based on its environment, because the feedback mechanisms recognize limitations and basically switch off growth to say, well, if
Adaptation.
you get any bigger, you're going to die because you can't get enough food, so we're not going to grow anymore. Now,
Mhm.
that's the logic. The system doesn't have a logic. The system just exists because there was mutations which came up. A mutation happened, and then this limiter was put in place, which activates when there's a limit. And that animal had an advantage, and then it became the primary gene parent of the species because it reproduced and the other ones didn't. So there's no thinking about evolution. There's no, well, we can look at the logic, we can look at the why, but there's no thought process in evolution. It's just there's mutations, and some of them will kill the animal outright before it's even born. Other ones they'll survive with, but it doesn't give them any advantage. In fact, if it gives them a disadvantage, they'll die before they reproduce. Those genes won't get passed on. There'll be some mutations that don't make any physiological changes, so they don't seem any different from the other members of the herd or the flock or the species. But when the environment changes, then some of these mutations in some of these individuals will give them an advantage. And that's when they get to reproduce, and the ones that don't have an advantage may not. And then those genes become more common in the populace. And then the genome of the species shifts towards this new improvement based on the change in the environment. So there's no thought process. We sort of look at it and go, oh, they evolved to enable them to do this. Well, no, there was a mutation which existed within the population which came to the fore because there was this change. There was no thought process, no thinking. It just happened that way. If there wasn't the mutations, if everybody was exactly the same genetically and something happened that their genome couldn't deal with, the species is gone. So species that have these mutations and have variation, which gives them a chance to survive a change, are the ones that have the chance to survive the change, the ones that do survive the change. And that's why we have mutations in evolution.
Yeah.
If no thought process involved at all. It just happens that way. But Charles Darwin was a very smart man, and he worked that out. Thumbs up for Charles Darwin.
So we come from monkeys.
No, we don't. we have an ancestor with monkeys.
Well, actually, I was listening to a podcast that they determined that by our DNA, our direct ancestors are the chimpanzee, the bonobos, not the gorillas.
They're not our direct ancestor. They're our closest branch.
The closest branch.
Closest,
yes. Yeah. They're not our ancestor. We do not come from monkeys. Monkeys and we exist now. Neither of us existed at that time, but there was a creature that was a bit like both of us, but not as finalized as we are now, that we both came from. There was a split. There was a fork at some point.
And this is why I called evolution a forking of, beings, because we are unique. We are unique. And I remember when I was in school, when I was in elementary school, and, back then our knowledge of evolution wasn't as vast as it is now. And I remember my teacher, I was very small. I couldn't tell you how old I was. And he said, like, we come from monkeys. And I would get up and say, I didn't come from monkeys. Your mama came from monkeys.
That's how Robert flunked.
But I was right in my statement, because we are unique.
No, man, let's put this aside. When you take off your shirt, you look like a monkey.
No, but look at this. We are unique. If you think about in a serious manner, we are unique because our branch in that forking or tree is completely unique, because we are the results of all the stuff that happened in between.
Well, we are the only existing member of that branch. Neanderthals were quite similar to us. They were genetically different from us slightly, but it has been postulated there is quite a bit of Neanderthal DNA within the human genome.
Mm-hmm.
So they may not have been different enough to be considered a different species. Like we may have been able to cross-fertilize and mate successfully, but they were either they'd been separated from us for long enough to change enough that they were a bit different, and then the two populations then intermingled again, which is more than likely, considering like if Homo sapiens that we are now evolved in Africa, and maybe Neanderthals evolved in Europe, and then when Homo sapiens started expanding out of Africa, they moved into the range of the Neanderthals or something like that.
And we come from the
then they
Homo.
came into contact. But the whole thing about Homo sapiens and why we are, unique, has got to do with our brain size and achieving, full consciousness, full sapience. And it's believed that a lot of that has to do with seafood.
I thought it had to do with erectus.
There was a pinch point in our evolutionary history where humanity was nearly wiped out. They believe there was only a small number of humans living on the coast of Africa, and they were hiding in the caves there and eating seafood off the rocks and whatever they could catch. And the two things that they believe was really important in the development of humanity as we exist today is seafood and cooking. So seafood was giving us the nutrients, and cooking broke down the food that we were eating enough so that we could get enough of the nutrients out of it that we could grow our brains.
But I think that the cooking also deteriorated the properties of the food that we were getting.
Yes and no. I mean, you eat things that haven't been cooked, you'd often get poisoned.
Yeah.
Salmonella was not an issue back then.
It wouldn't necessarily be salmonella, but there's all sorts of things that you probably don't want to eat when you have no medicine whatsoever. So, cooking things was a way of destroying
bacteria,
dangerous bacteria or parasites or whatever in the food, and it also partially broke the food down so that we could get more nutrients out of it.
I always thought that that obviously has its benefits, but the downside of that is it made our system evolved into a weaker system. You know where I'm going with this? The body doesn't have to work as hard to get the nutrients from food that our ancestors had to when they ate the food raw. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes and no. There's one thing to say that, we were tougher before we started cooking, but we were also weaker because we couldn't get enough nutrients out of the food.
Yeah, I think the lifespan was shorter too, right?
Yeah, definitely. But the whole thing about, the human brain growing to the point where we developed sentience came along because of seafood and cooking, because we got the nutrients in seafood was really good for developing a brain. People always say, if you want to think clearly, go eat a fish. So seafood is really good. So anytime, boys and girls, when you got to do a test or studying for exams or what have you, eat seafood. It will help. Also get enough sleep and don't stress too much, but eat seafood.
Drink water.
Yeah, make sure you're hydrated. But the whole part of the cooking, it releases a lot more of the nutrients from the food than you can from just digestion. And sure, overcooking can destroy some of the nutrients, but if you cook it to the right length, you don't lose too many of them, and you get more than you lose. So basically, if it wasn't for the invention of cooking, we wouldn't have civilization. It was the thing that made our brains get big enough that we, could think and use tools and do all the things we needed to do to create civilization. And of course, farming became very important as well. Rather than hunting and gathering, we started herding animals and growing crops, and that increased the amount of food we had. And then we wouldn't have those really tough times in winter. We'd have enough food to put away for winter, and it all sort of snowballed on top of itself to create what we have today. Civilization is built on these really small little things that made a huge difference. And that's an evolution in itself. It's not only biological evolution, but it's societal evolution.
Yeah.
Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but do the best you can.
Most of it's bad.
This is what I love about this movie. It's not a serious movie, but it actually produces great, amazing scientific conversation. And you don't have to be a scientist, or you don't have to have those conversations to enjoy this movie. It's just, it leaves you wonder. It gives enough questions, which I think is the basis of science. Question, what was the saying? Question everything, and try to find the answers. And finding answers, you find more questions, and you move on from there.
And go to multiple sources. Do not believe one source of information.
Please do. I mean, you probably heard me talk about that in previous episodes, and how that is one of my pet peeves.
They're like, great. Go to Wikipedia.
But you know what? Wikipedia has a great thing that I really like, and it's the fact that if you scroll down, you see the multiple sources that people use to create the article. So it is very likely that you might find an article in Wikipedia that is way off base, is completely wrong. But if you look in those sources, you'll find where the author came up with that conclusion, and you can make your own conclusion based on those, because there are different sources, and I like that. And it's one of my pet peeves too. And you probably hear me talk about this in previous episodes, where it just bugs me how back when I started with the internet, it was a well-known fact: don't believe anything you read online. Oh yeah, is that a girl you're chatting with? That could be a guy. Which there's nothing wrong with it
Probably
if
Geo.
but it's not necessarily that fact. It's the fact that it has the possibility of being hidden. And it has a possibility of someone saying something for their own benefit. But now it's like, how many times have you heard someone say something very far-fetched, and you're like, how do you came about this? How did you know about this? It's like, I read it online, and I'm like, hold up a second. Did we went back from like our initial thought that don't believe anything you read online, to now if it's online it must be true? And that's not even true. Even if you actually did an experiment, even if you yourself did an experiment and came up with a conclusion, even that is not the Bible. Because you should go and look and see how many other people have done that same experiment, and see what variations of results they got, and the combination of results should give you an idea what the true answer might be on that particular topic. So the fact that someone would take an article and believe it solely on that one article that you read, to me is a foreign concept, and I don't understand it. And this is why we have so much bad information propagating online, because someone reads it, it feels that could be right, that makes sense to their in their head, and then populate it and recirculate it and retweet it and talk about it. And now we have a lot of that particular conversation going online, and people say, okay, it makes sense to me. A lot of people are talking about it, so it must be true.
Yep.
I don't know. I always go into these rants because it's something that baffles me. Um, you know,
Hey
and it
man,
happens.
if I heard from the internet, it's true. I don't care about peer review papers or anything like that. Nothing.
Well, just as an aside, which sort of follows on from that, when you're in high school and you're doing science and you read stuff in the textbook, it's in a textbook. It's written down. This is the thing that the school's providing you to study with. It must be true, right?
Must be good. Good
Must be
observation.
true.
Ray.
Well, nah, not always.
You know, and you have a really good point. I talked about this in another episode, in a previous episode, and this is a personal experience that happened to me. And I shared this with you, Ray, before, and you told me a personal experience about this particular topic as well. It's the fact that, you know, when I entered college for the very first time, I had the wrong notion of what college actually was. In my mind, I came out of high school. The teachers are called teachers for a reason. They're teaching you. Their job is to teach. I started college with that same notion, thinking that professors are teachers and their responsibility is to teach you. This is completely wrong, obviously, at least from my perspective. And it was called out by one of my professors. I can't remember which class it was. And he says, you know, we had a conversation. He says, my job is not, because I have with that mentality. I started talking to him and telling him, you know, you're a teacher. Teach, you have to teach me. It's like, no, I don't have to teach you. Professors are facilitators. They facilitate learning. They point you in the right direction. It is your responsibility to learn the topic.
Yep.
And that was life-changing for me, especially on the following conversation when he said, I am just like you. Obviously, I study a lot more than you. I have a degree on the topic that I'm teaching. I am actually doing some research on the topic that I am facilitating. So, you know, there's slightly differences, but just remember, I am a human like you, and just like being a human like you, I am I am faulty to the same things that are unique to humans. For example, I could have had a research done. I could have had an experiment done on something, and I come up with a conclusion. And I am biased to that because we are humans. I might have discussed this with colleagues on the same scientific research. Half of them might agree with me because their results were similar to mine. Half of them might not agree with me because their results were completely different from mine. But I could be wrong. I could be saying something in class that is completely wrong.
Yep.
It is your job to call me out on it.
Yep.
And that changed my mind completely. Because prior to that conversation, I thought, okay, everything you read in textbooks, you know, obviously was done by someone in the know. So it's so fantastic, fascinating to me, because on that mentality, people could become scientists themselves, because you realize, okay, now you have to do your own research. You're not going to get all the answers. No scientist does. And that's the whole idea. It's trying to find what the right questions to ask to get the right answers. And that whole thing, that whole conversation with that professor changed my life in that aspect.
Well, yeah, science is constantly evolving. Truth in science is only true for the moment in which it's stated. Perfect example of this was when my father went to school. He was taught that the smallest particle of matter was an atom. Because
Yes.
he went to school in
No
the
neutrons, no
1930s.
protons.
No, it was an atom. That's all they knew about. And then they split the atom during World War II. And yeah, that was wrong. They now knew that there was neutrons and protons and electrons, and that you could split atoms. And then later on, they found out about quarks and all sorts of the subatomic particles. And, we
in
know
quantum.
Exactly. We know what we know. We think we know what we know, but there's always something else out there that will change the way we think about what we think we know. If you can follow that line of thinking.
Yeah, but
Now we
that's
know they
exactly
know
my
we-
point. That's exactly my point. Is we don't know what questions to ask. More often than not, we ask the wrong questions. Come up with the answer for that question, which is not the answer, which is not the right answer. And I think that's the challenge in a scientific process: is how do we know that we're asking the right questions? But that's just my perception of the whole.
But also we have to be able to then examine the question we're asking.
Mhm.
So, like I was talking about with a few shows back about sequencing a human genome. The first human genome sequence took 13 years. Now you can do it overnight.
Yes.
With current technology. So that's how much things can change in, well, it started in 91. So that was roughly 31 years. So in 31 years, you can go from taking 13 years to do this thing to 13. The world record's 6.5 hours. So, I mean, you see how things change. You might have a question that you can't answer yet, because the technology is not there to do it, or the fundamental knowledge needed to then ask the question properly is not there yet. All science relies on other science, and everything is sort of evolving and moving sort of at different paces and different speeds. And this one will hit a ceiling and it won't be able to go anywhere until this one comes up. Perfect example is electric cars. Until Elon Musk did his research into batteries, and improving the battery strength and longevity, electric cars really weren't viable. But then he did that, and now electric cars are more viable. They're not perfect, but they're usable. So these things come along in increments, and sometimes you need one part of science to get its shit together and move things forward before your part of science can actually do anything.
Yeah.
So it's all linked. But the point that I wanted to get across just before you wander off again is in school, in elementary school, things exist, right? This is a thing, and maybe one day you'll be able to spell it. Example, photosynthesis, and my son, who's in 3rd class, trying to spell photosynthesis. Then you get to junior high, and this is a thing, and this is basically how it works. And then you get to high school, and if you're still studying the same stuff, this is a thing, and this is more in depth into how it works. This is there's more detail, right? And then you get to university level or college level, however you want to look at it, and this is a thing. This is how we think it works. This is a whole bunch of stuff we don't understand yet. Okay, go and research it.
We tell you that
now
this
it's your
was
turn
how
to
it
work
was,
it out.
but it is not how it is.
Yeah. I've sat there with 3rd year university students and talked to them about what it's like after university, and telling them how, well, you know how you were told this is how it works. Yeah, well, that's how it worked yesterday. It may not work that way tomorrow. So just be ready for that.
So your teachings are fallacy.
The only
Somewhat,
constant
yeah.
is change.
That's right. And taxes.
So to bring back this conversation to the movie, which I mean,
There was a movie?
We got deep. Remember the
Don't tell people where
conversation
I've
that I
been.
had? Huh?
You said we got deep. I said, don't tell people where I've been.
Yeah.
I had a question. When there's a scene when they're resequencing DNA for these aliens, and those computers um, from 2001.
Yeah.
We know the power that these computers had back then. It wasn't that they were powerful, but they're not as powerful as they are now. And one question that I posted in a pre-conversation to the recording of the show is, we know how fast resequencing human genome is on today's,
It's not re-sequencing, it's sequencing.
sequencing. Thanks for that. We know how fast it is, right? But how fast was it in 2001? Because in that scene, it makes it look like they just punch in some keys. And what would you say? Does it appears to be like a day? Like in about a day, they had
Yeah.
the results.
Mhm.
And in 2001, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it would take about 9 months for resequencing for sequencing the human genome on
Well, they were near the end of the Human Genome Project, so I don't think he was genetically sequencing an entire organism. Certainly, smaller organisms have less genes because there's less things that the cell needs to know about. So they had sequenced smaller organisms entirely, they have key genetic sequences for certain organisms because they use them as genetic manipulation test beds. Now, what's the name of that fly? It's basically the fruit fly, and that's been fully sequenced and has been for quite some time. And basically, when they're studying what genes do, because a lot of genes are conserved through species and through evolution. So if there's something that's really required, like you can't live without it, that gene will not change, because anytime it changes, it kills the organism, because you have to have that gene there for life to work. Then that gene will be the same in humans as it is in a whole bunch of other animals. And often insects and other things as well. And I don't want to get too far into it, but there's certain gene sequences for certain proteins that are used in a different way in plants than it is in animals, but it's still the same gene, right? Hemoglobin is a perfect example of this. Everybody's heard of hemoglobin that's in your blood, and it's used to bind oxygen and carry oxygen around your body. But in plants, it's used in nodules in the root, and it's used to bind oxygen to keep oxygen away from the bacteria that's formed in a nodule that helps fix nitrogen. But it can't fix nitrogen if oxygen is there. And this is probably where they got the idea that a nitrogen-based life form would find oxygen toxic because of this interaction in the plant root. So there's a bit of science that makes a bit of sense based on what we know from carbon-based life forms. But that aside, that same gene is used in a plant and animals in two different ways, but it's conserved because it does the same thing. It binds oxygen. It doesn't have to be used in the same way, but it does that thing, so it's kept around because it does that thing. But it's doing it in two different creatures for two different reasons, but in the same way. So if you want to study genes, a specific gene, you will find a lot of those really important, you can't mess with these things genes in fruit fly that are in people. So say there's a genetic disease of one of these things, one of these genes in a person, you can study in the fruit fly. You can mess around with it in the fruit fly, but you don't have the problem of, well, you're not supposed to do that in people. And fruit flies have fast generational cycles, so you can look at effects more rapidly than you could in a larger organism, which has a slower life cycle. So that's why you have these test bed organisms which have their genomes fully sequenced. That's why they did it.
Another another thing that I found interesting is, and this might be related to something that we talked in our season one's Gataka episode, is when they were looking initially at these beings, whatever that liquid is that they got from the rock. They were looking, and they said that this thing had 10 base, um, 10 base pairs.
Yeah.
And human is only 4. And this is basically what we, if you go back to our episode, you'll get a little bit bigger conversation on our thought and our clever weight of the name of the movie using the base pairs of human DNA. But what kind of, would that help in a way in the rapid evolution of this whatever that was? Because it looks like it had multiple species, but could this be kind of like a Noah's Ark, and that's the reason why it had 10 base pairs, and the reason why we end up having so many? Is it possible that we have um, a different a base pair distribution from one alien type to another, what we saw in here? Obviously, they're not accounting for the evolution of most of these alien beings that we're seeing in this movie. I mean, I have so many questions because it makes sense to me, because they're freaked out because they're like, oh, it's 10 base pairs when we only have 4. So that started my thinking, my rationing, my mental conversation into like, okay, are they all using all 10 base pairs, or this is something kind of like a Noah's Ark where you have to have all possible combinations to create different, and maybe one alien uses 4, another one uses 5, but they're all like slightly different or completely different, and it's just a combination and variation of all the 10 pairs that they saw in the petri dish.
Okay, I don't think you quite understand how DNA works. So I'm going to have to give you a 2-minute primer so you understand what you're talking about.
Please
okay,
do.
So basically what DNA is an informational system for creating proteins.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you have 4 base pairs, which is now I just want to get this right. So I Googled it earlier because I couldn't remember off the top of my head. Now, where's it hiding?
Adenine, guanine, thymine,
and cytosine. Yeah. So
and spice, thyme,
known as A, T, G, and C, and A and T create a bond in a DNA molecule, and T and C create a bond. But it's the one that starts, I guess, is on the left or on the top or whatever. You basically get sense and antisense. So so what happens is that it's a double linked set of information. It's more stable when they're linked together. But what happens when it's read is that a protein comes along and it splits the chain and it reads one side, and then it joins it back together again, and it creates what's called an RNA. So you've got DNA, which is sort of the source information. Think of it as a library. And then you've got RNA. Think of it as taking notes and taking the notes away. So you have a source library which you can't take away. You have RNA, which creates a message that you can take away. It's called messenger RNA. What a shock! There are other types of RNA, but the one in this process is called messenger RNA. And then that strand of RNA, which is it's a single chain, not a double chain, then moves out into a protein structure called a ribosome, and is fed through it. And the information on that DNA is read by the ribosome, and then it combines. Now you're creating proteins, amino acids. So it takes amino acids based on their information and creates them into a chain. Okay, so you're basically building proteins. So you'll have ATGC, which will be the code for a particular amino acid, and then it'll draw that one in, and that will be the start, and then it'll get the next one, whatever the code is for that, and combine it together, and you get this long chain of amino acids, and then that has to be folded to create the actual 3D structure of the protein. So it has a secondary structure and a tertiary structure to get the folding correct. And then once the protein's folded correctly, then it becomes a functional protein, and it may be used within the cell, or it may be excreted to do some other sort of job. And different proteins will be built up to create all sorts of different molecular engines, as it were, to do all sorts of different things within the body. Some of them will be enzymes, which will dissolve things or modify things. Other things will be messenger proteins. They do all sorts of different jobs. But the basis of all of those things is the DNA within every one of your cells. So all the information is packed into one cell, but those cells are replicated, producing more proteins, and then producing enough of the cell that then the cell can divide, and then you get 2 cells, and then you get more cells, and it's that information in the library, which is the DNA, which then is taken, the messenger is taken out, and it's used to produce proteins, and then the proteins do the things. Okay, so it's quite a complicated process, and it does lots of different things, but you need to be able to produce the proteins that you need at the right time. So there's got to be signals that come back to tell the cell which bits of DNA need to be read and what things need to be produced at the time. And then you get all sorts of unusual situations, like when a virus DNA gets into the cell, and what the virus DNA does is it actually inserts itself into the genome, and then there's all these little bits of code and stuff at the start of each of the genes, which can adjust the amount that it gets read. And viruses tend to get read a lot and reproduced a lot, to the point where the cell's full of virus, it's produced nothing else, and then it explodes and all the virus escapes and goes off and infects other cells. So the difference between a bacterial infection and a viral infection is that the bacteria reproduces itself and attacks your body, and the virus actually uses your cells to reproduce itself. So viruses aren't considered to be a functional organism. They require the cell of the host to actually reproduce. So they're kind of creepy. It's like the invasion of the cell snatchers. But that one, it's a really complicated system, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on, and we're still learning things about it. You'd think after so many years of studying biology that we'd know everything, but nah, there's so much going on, there's so much variation, so many little things that they're still discovering every day. And there's all these feedback mechanisms between different types of cells and the brain and all the different hormones doing their things, and then the way cancers work. And all of these things change the way the system works. So it's really, really complex. But the basis of it is the DNA. The DNA is the bit that starts things. Now, having 4 base pairs or 10 base pairs, it all depends on what it's coding for. So if you've got 4 base pairs coding for the number of different amino acids that you can have within a cell, that's really all the variability within the DNA that you need. Now, if you've got more base pairs than that, there must be a requirement in those aliens for more information. What that information is coding for, I couldn't tell you, because humanity as yet hasn't found another life form that's not based on the DNA structure that you see now, that has more base pairs and has more information in it. So when we do find one, it will be bloody interesting to see what that's actually coding for and see how it differs from carbon-based life on Earth. And that's one of the holy grails of biological science, in that people want to see a different organism that's evolved on a different planet and has come up with a different system. I mean, DNA is just the way it happened here, right? It's the way it happened on Earth. We haven't seen any other life forms from any other planets, so we don't know exactly how they'll store their information, whether they'll be using proteins at all, or whether they'll be using something else because it's not carbon-based. So they won't create proteins per se. They'll create other types of molecules that will do the jobs that proteins are doing in our bodies. And maybe there'll be a whole bunch more of these base molecules that they can use. So therefore, they'll need more information. So therefore, they may need more points of variability within their information storage system, which may not be called DNA because it'll be different. But I doubt that we're going to see a life form based on a different molecule, a different element, having DNA per se. I don't think we'll end up being the same stuff. I don't think it will be directly comparable, and I don't think you'll be able to throw it into a system designed for 4 base pairs and be able to read 10.
For all of you who are actually watching on YouTube, I actually posted an image that could kind of give you a visual about the 4 base pairs.
Yeah, so there's lots of that packed in the nucleus of the cell based on chromosomes, and it actually has to be unwound and split into 2 to be able to be read, which happens millions of times a minute within your body right now. You are part of this, and it is part of you.
Yeah.
No need to freak out. This is the way biology works.
Oh, and we got deep again.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think a DNA sequencing system designed for carbon-based life with 4 base pairs would be able to read 10. I think that's a load of horse hooey. That's my personal opinion.
But you have a really good point when you said that it would be definitely different, especially if we take the fact mentioned in this movie that these beings are created and they're not carbon based, and they are nitrogen based. So that this is something unique to carbon life form. Any other type of life form will we'd use something completely different. So that does make a lot more sense. It in a way, I also think that the amount of base pairs doesn't necessarily mean better or worse in this particular scenario, because they're completely different. But it just means it's different. It just means it's alien.
Well, I don't think a biologist at a community college would be able to examine an alien life form and work this stuff out. It would be so different that it would require a team of researchers and decades to try and work out exactly how the system worked. We didn't work out human DNA in like a couple of days. It took us, decades of research to even postulate the idea and then be unable to disprove it long enough to accept it as the working hypothesis, and then create machinery, devices, and experimental procedures to then be able to physically examine that. So it took a lot of people and a lot of years. And I don't think that he would be able to look at an alien life form and go, oh, yeah, it's got 10 base pairs. Yeah, no. No, you couldn't do that, buddy. Sorry. You're not a science god. You couldn't do that. But, for a story, they had to show that it was different from us. So they just went, hey, yeah, let's work on a few more base pairs and pretend that the community college shitty computer would be able to tell that. And we'll just hand wave and move on.
Yeah, and I think they try to make it better when they gave you the little plot twist that the guy actually worked for research and development for the government, which it makes it a little better, but still is not an entire team with over a decade of research. So yeah.
it cracked me up when the guy at the front gate wanted to shoot him. I was like, why was he wanted to shoot the guy? And then you find out in the courtroom about 10 minutes later into the movie, and you're like, oh, yeah,
Yep.
okay. I would have wanted to shoot him too. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably was personally affected.
I expect so.
And that's what we get. What was the phrase, Gio, that you used? The Kane madness?
King Madness.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't be bad. I think I would have shot him too.
Diarrhea.
Yeah, diarrhea was one of the symptoms, right?
Well, I mean, when they went to the truck and did the King Madness, I was like sex and diarrhea, because if he was giving him King Madness and they were getting sexy time, that was
Oh
gonna
my
be a
God.
forking issue.
Different type of cane Magnus. I think.
Couldn't they have waited? You know, I mean, it sounds to me like they had something to prove, and they couldn't wait to start forking.
I think that he knew, the actor knew that if it was not on set, he was not gonna really get anywhere to their base.
On film, or it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Is that what you're telling me?
Oh wow. Yeah, you wouldn't tell by our conversation on this podcast, because we have gotten deep in the topics multiple
That's
times.
what happened when you're forking, you go deep.
But the movie is fun. It's just fun and funny.
Yeah, for whoever is listening, it doesn't get that scientific like these two guys took
Yeah,
it.
that's just us. That's just us, that we overthink everything, and I hope that that's the reason why you come back week after week and listen to us, because that's who we are.
Hey, I got to do something with my biology degree and 30 years of experience.
Yeah, but this movie it's just so much fun.
There's just enough science in it that hangs together that makes it vaguely believable, but there's big holes in it.
Yeah.
No pun intended, right? About the big holes.
That climax of the movie, it was something else.
You had to say that word, didn't you?
What are they doing? I think they're doing a giant enema.
Yeah.
Oh God. What was Dr. Block comment when he said, like, I'll do it. I have, he had a vested interest.
He had a score, my image score to set up.
He had a
score to settle. Yeah.
Yeah, you made someone stick something on my, ass, so I am going to stick something up yours.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, that scene was hilarious. What was it? He got bitten by this huge oversized mosquito that eventually went inside his body, which make me question about the reality of that scene. But that let's suspend the disbelief for a moment. And they're at the table, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to amputate." And he's like, "No, don't amputate. Don't let them take my leg away." And he's like,
testicles.
He's going for the testicles. Take the leg. Oh my God. But yeah, I was thinking about that scene and that creature going inside his body the way that it was. It could have destroyed a lot of internal organs.
That was a rapist mosquito.
Oh God.
It's in me.
Oh wow. So I guess we just science the crap out of this thing.
Yeah, basically.
It was
to
not
quote
such a serious movie.
To quote the Martians, in a nicer way, obviously.
Hey, if you think about it, it's better to kill aliens with head and shoulder than with Elvis Presley.
Yeah. Well, I was commenting to Gio
Should we
that,
cover
you
that
know, and
movie?
this is the coolest thing about this movie is the fact that, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. If you're listening to this and you know of any other way, but I'm thinking really hard, and this is the only science fiction movie that I can think of where we use shampoo as a weapon to kill aliens, and that just kills me right there. You know, that sentence alone. You know, we have used everything so far,
Head and
but not
shoulders.
shampoo.
I just found the quote you were mentioning before. An alien bug is crawling inside Block's leg. Dr. Allison Reed, what are you going to do? Dr. Paulson, we might have to amputate. Harry, whoa, Doc, don't take the leg. Ira, don't let them take my leg. Ira says, isn't there anything else you can do? He thinks he's an athlete. Nurse Tate, Doctor, look. Dr. Paulson, it's headed for his testicles. Harry Block, take it, take the leg.
Oh my god! And this is just the movie that it is. It just laughed. So I think you know what I was going to say is we just science the crap out of this movie. So I guess we're only one thing left, and is to ask final thoughts on this movie.
I thought you were going to get Gio to do his Tuki Tuki impression again.
Oh, that's gonna be the closing.
Oh, okay. Tuki
Oh
Tuki.
my God. I love that actor. It's, it's so much fun. I think the cast was amazing for this movie. You know,
They were.
Well,
so
let's make a point. Stifler's mom is sexiest of all.
Shame that's not a sci-fi. I'm sure we could talk about that for 6 hours.
So let me start with Gio. Do you have any final thoughts about this movie?
As serious as it gets, I think that I'm gonna use Head and Shoulders more often.
You'll
That's
be
everything I
protected
had to
against
say.
alien invasion.
I'll be immune to any alien invasion for sure. Use Head and Shoulders, listeners.
Yeah, you just gotta you use Head and Shoulders, and then stick your head in the alien's butt. That's the way to do it. That's what they did it. That's how it worked in this movie.
So basically, you turn your hair into an anti-alien weapon.
Yep. Just headbang the shit out of it.
And that is what Harry Block said at the end of the movie. Don't you ever tell anyone where I have been.
You wouldn't believe what I've seen.
Oh my god! And that fart on the way there, the alien farted on them. And it's like,
Yeah.
Oh, nasty!
oh my god!
There's so many funny parts of this movie. Ira says, if I was a giant nasty alien bird in a department store, where would I be? Harry says, lingerie. Ira says, not you, the bird. Harry says, lingerie?
And he was right. He was so right.
That's where it was.
Oh my god! So, Ray, what is your final thought in this movie?
Don't be as critical of the movie as I was. The science is there to be vaguely believable. If you're an actual scientist, you just have to suspend disbelief. It's cute that something as common and as harmless as anti-dandruff shampoo could save the world, and that's funny in and of itself. This movie stood up well. It's got the whole, government conspiracy trying to hide the truth from everybody kind of angle going. It's got the plucky scientists, which, is almost never a thing, really, except in Ivan Reitman movies. But it is a fun ride. It's really snappy dialogue and it's really funny. The actors do a fantastic job. It's one of those hidden gems that as Robert said, you forget about, and then you go back to it and you go, God, I'd forgotten how good this thing was. And from the opening scene of Wayne, now who's Wayne played by? Who is the actor who plays Wayne?
Sean William Scott.
Yeah, Sean William Scott. Now he's a funny guy.
Stifler.
He is
you
a funny
will
guy.
remember Stiflers.
Yeah. So not only is Stifler in this movie, but so is one of the Ghostbusters as the governor of Arizona.
Yes.
So
Dan
that was
Aykroyd?
Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah,
Dan Aykroyd, who also played one of the Ghostbusters. So Ray Stantz, I think he was in Ghostbusters. So yeah, I mean, there's links to comedy, great comedy actors. There's plenty of comedy in there. The science is just believable enough to make it hold together. And from the very opening scene where you've got Stifler lighting fire to a small wooden building, throwing a doll in there, and then running inside to rescue her and giving her mouth-to-mouth before his car gets hit by a meteor. Gets blown through the air, which he then continues to drive once it's flipped back over.
Oh my God!
Just, I mean,
hey, cars weren't built the same way they were built before, so
No, it was a classic, and it was tougher than tough. But yeah, from an opening scene like that to a closing scene of an actual Head and Shoulders ad, except controls your dandruff and alien invasion. Look, if you have listened to us without watching this movie, we kind of spoiled it a bit, but there's a whole bunch more good scenes. So go and watch it if you haven't watched it already. If you haven't watched it in a while, go and watch it again. It is good. It's worth the watch.
Oh yes, you'll definitely thank us.
This has got my science vagary stamp of approval.
My final thoughts on this movie is, I would have to add to what you guys mentioned, because I agree 100% on everything that has been said. This movie has a lot for everything. It has a lot for anyone. It is mainly a comedy. We need comedy in our lives. We need a lot more comedy in our lives. And I agree when Ray said we're not sure if this is a comedy with sci-fi or sci-fi with a lot of comedy. The lines are completely blur. And this is one of the reasons that I love this movie so much. It's a way that it's how this movie actually blurs that division. And it makes it, and it does it well. Granted, you have to suspend disbelief like any other sci-fi movie that you have seen. So this shouldn't be news, but it is refreshingly believable in the way they delivered the science. And it plays well in the story. But overall, I have to go back to the fact that it is a real fun movie and it's a comedy, and we definitely need more sci-fi comedy in our lives. So if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a while, I invite you to watch it and then reach out to us and let's have that conversation and see what you guys' thoughts are. Did you guys dug in deep like we normally do? More so in this movie because of the amount of science that it had, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we haven't really talked about. Or did you just enjoy the fun and comedy that this movie provides? So let us know what you guys think about this movie. Reach out You can reach out to us on Discord, Twitter. You can even actually put comments on our YouTube channel video.
Yeah.
And let's
Go to our
let's
YouTube.
yeah, you can go to YouTube. This would actually release a month after the audio version releases, and you can start a conversation there as well. Just I usually respond to your comments all the time. So and we're all there too, so we will be able to respond. So let's start a conversation. And I'm really, and the reason why I'm saying this, I'm really curious to see what your thoughts are. I know what my perspective in this movie is, and it's one of those that I'm sure you're familiar with when you've seen a particular movie and you're like, you rewatch it again and you're like, okay, this is how this movie was. It was good. But this one always surprises me every time that I watch it on how good it was and how I could have forgotten that I actually purchased this movie a while ago. Is that kind of movie where it's one of those that you wish you could see more often. So that is my final thought. Should we move on to what I'm afraid is going to be a long segment?
No, it's not going to be a long segment, mainly because we've covered most of it already.
Okay.
I have one last comment that didn't quite come across with the rest of it. But
before we go into the next segment, right?
No. The comment is for the next segment.
Okay, so here we go.
The science in sci-fi.
Basically, we've been covering a lot of that through the conversation, so I've already said most of what I was planning to say here, but there is one little bit that I can add on that didn't actually come up in the conversation, and it's about nitrogen-based life forms. I'm working from the David Darling website, daviddarling.info. And he's got here about nitrogen-based life. It's one of the handful of elements suggested as alternatives to carbon as a basis of life elsewhere in the universe. Principally, this is because it can form long chains at low temperatures. That's important, at low temperatures, with a liquid solvent such as ammonia or hydrogen cyanide. So rather than being in water, nitrogen in ammonia or hydrogen cyanide has the opportunity to form long-chain molecules. On the other hand, a major drawback of nitrogen as a backbone of large molecular structures is that the energy of the triple bond in nitrogen N2 is much greater than that of a single bond. So nitrogen-nitrogen bonds tend to revert back to elemental nitrogen. So that means that the long chains of nitrogen molecules are more likely to break up into N2 structures rather than maintaining the long chains like carbon tends to do. Nitrogen can, however, form longer molecules with some other elements, including carbon, phosphorus, sulfur, and boron. Nitrogen can also form hydrides such as hydrazine. Now, a lot of that's probably too chemically for our audience, but basically what it's saying is that at temperatures on Earth, which normal carbon-based life finds suitable, it would actually probably be too warm for nitrogen-based life, and nitrogen-based life would probably function better in a colder environment. So if you think about the Goldilocks zone, or the inhabitable area, which is the area where you can have liquid water around a star, that area around Sol, which is our sun, is roughly Venus to Mars, with where the Earth is being about the sweet spot, the best spot for liquid water, based on the amount of energy coming from the sun. Of course, the size of the planet and the atmosphere and all those other things change things, but based just on the amount of energy hitting a solar mass, like a planetary body, at that distance, Earth is in a pretty sweet spot. I think it's actually just a little bit inside the exact center of the Goldilocks zone. But of course, nitrogen-based life would require a much colder environment, so it would be further out. So you'd be looking around Mars, asteroid field Jupiter kind of area, probably for the Goldilocks zone for nitrogen-based life, because they need a colder environment. And of course, they don't want liquid water; they want other fluids to be their basis for their life. So, having a nitrogen-based life form come to Earth and not only survive in a warmer temperature, but be hyper evolving, so have a really fast molecular rate, which I suppose if it was warmed up, it would go faster if it could survive that. But the basis of the nitrogen long chains breaking down when they get too much energy would kind of suggest that wouldn't work. But also having it being able to become this massive life form just doesn't seem to hold together based on the information about what they propose nitrogen-based life might look like and where it might function. Because, of course, when a life form is in a colder environment, it would have to, based on thermodynamics, work more slowly. It would have a slower life cycle and a slower metabolic rate, not a faster one in its natural habitat. So there's vague pluses and a whole bunch of minuses in this idea. But I mean, suspend disbelief. It's a fun movie.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
But basically everything else that I researched we've already covered. So that's it.
Yes, like we said, we don't, we don't know rails,
Rails. No.
Folks.
You are so beautiful. I'm communicating here.
It was interesting. The bird didn't reply to the caw, but he replied to the freaking song.
Sing, rub some funk on it.
Oh God, yeah. So again, thank you guys for being with us. Just one more week, and
Tuki.
I really hope that you guys would enjoy this episode as much as our previous ones. We definitely geek it out even more on this one than we typically. Well, I wouldn't say typically do, because there have been a couple that we have geeked out as much as this one. I do. I do want to say Happy New Year. This is going to be posted. I believe is could have been New Year's Eve. So Happy New Year. I hope that you are spending the holiday with family, or you're having a happy holiday overall. So thank you for being with us just one more time, and I hope that you continue listen to us in this new year. And we hope to have many more conversations with you. So thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Till next time.
Bye for now.